I grew up in a Hasidic family, sort of speaking some strange mix of Yiddish, Hebrew, and English, but never really properly, specifically learned Yiddish. I'd like to eventually be able to provide psychotherapy in Yiddish. I really want to be able to work within the Hasidic community. It's a market that is in need of therapists and yet is often overlooked. And I think that it's really important that there's someone available and a psychologist that can help that community who understands both the culture and the language. So it was very interesting this summer to have the experience of learning Yiddish from a very secular perspective. And most of the context of the previous words I had heard were within the context of very religious learning and wouldn't necessarily be helpful in a psychologist's office. I mean, it was wonderful to be able to read a poem about love or a poem about other things rather than, what I've had in the past, which is mostly a lot of Torahs. I would say there's almost Englishisms like universalish, which I had never heard before this, and it's such a useful word. I think a lot of people think that Yiddish is either dead or only exists within a Hasidic context, and I find that neither of those things are true. I find that there are a lot of secularists who believe that Yiddish is dead and we're learning it the same way people learn Latin, and as someone who grew up in a community where a lot of people only spoke Yiddish and went to high school in a community where it's very common for people to only speak Yiddish and many of the street signs and store signs are only in Yiddish, you can't say Yiddish as a language is dead in the same way Latin is. Also, I think in the Hasidic world, we sort of have this view that outside of Hasidus, Yiddish isn't really used. And that's not true. Amazing pieces of culture have been produced by a secular Yiddish world. I would love to see more interaction between Hasidic Yiddishists and secular Yiddishists. I think it would be really interesting to see what that might produce for both secularists to see how much Yiddish really is alive and still taught, as well as for Hasidim to see how much they can gain from a secular Yiddish perspective on Yiddish and on Jewish culture. I think that we have so many wonderful stories to tell each other that we can tell each other in Yiddish.